Good afternoon. Today's Diversity Professionals Group topic is Equitable Job Design. Before we get started, I would like to take a moment to go over a few housekeeping items. My name is Joanna Brown, and I will be the webinar organizer for today. We want to make sure today's presentation is extremely valuable for you. So we ask that you submit all questions by clicking on the question box in the control panel and typing your question, and we will be fielding them throughout the session. Our moderator today is Margarita Diaz, Director of Inclusion, Diversity, and Health Equity for the Metro Health System. In her role, Margie develops and promotes system initiatives and community partnerships to proactively and strategically address health disparities, with a focus on underserved, and underrepresented communities. And now I'll turn it over to Margie, who will facilitate the panel discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanna. And I'm so excited to be here with all of you today. And so I'm looking forward to our conversation with our panelists and with all of you, and looking forward to answering your questions. So I'm going to have the panelists go around and just quickly introduce themselves. Latoya, I'll start with you.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Latoya Smith. I am the Vice President and Talent Acquisition Manager for Fifth Third Bank.
Nicole?
Good afternoon. My name is Nicole McKinney Johnson. I'm the HR Director for both the AKA team as well as Harvest of Ohio.
And Jared?
Hi, everyone. I'm Jared Daly. I work for Cuyahoga County Board of Developmental Disabilities, and I'm the Regional Coordinator of Workforce Development.
Awesome. So glad to be here with all of you this afternoon. So we're going to kick it off with our first question. Our conversation today is around equitable job design. And so share one example of equitable job design in your organization that's working. And I'll just open it up to anyone that'd like to answer.
Well, I'll go ahead and start. So for me, one of the things that was important to my organization a few years ago was just making sure that we looked at all the compensations throughout all of our job grades. And one of the things that the leader, Greg Carmichael, was interested in is making sure that our employees were making a fair, equitable wage. So back in 2019, leadership decided that we were going to raise the minimum wage to 20%. And so we started, we implemented that back in 2019, the latter part of 2019, where we increased the minimum wage to $18 an hour. And so we were one of the first financial organizations, financial institutions to come out with that increase of the minimum wage. And I will tell you, the feedback from the employees was very, very overwhelming when you think about that extra money that's in your pay and what you can do with that, whether it's saving it, you know, finally being able to purchase that home, your dream home, college savings, or what have you. So it was really instrumental when we were able to do that across the board, as well as look at other salaries across the board to make sure that we were paying fair and equitable across all lines of businesses.
That's great, Latoya. That is wonderful. Nicole, you look like you're ready to say something.
Absolutely. So one of the things that was my charge upon coming on board with both Harvest of Ohio and the AKA team is to make sure that our salaries were in comparison to the same jobs across the board. So I'm dealing with construction management. I am also dealing with retail. So I had to be intentional in making sure that when I am vetting out candidates, that I am providing them with the salaries that they are in due of. And so if we all understand that in order to attain good talent, we have to make sure that they're compensated as such. So we are very intentional in making sure that is our design here as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's important for employees to know that they could do some research too and ensure that, you know, when they come to the table, right, that they're getting or asking for what's within reason. And I see Jared nodding his head.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I talk from my lens, it's not here at the county board. So I do a lot of consulting for external partners, and a lot of their first questions, like if we're talking about a disability hiring initiative, is what do we pay individuals? I'm always like, whatever you would pay somebody else in that same position. So kind of having those conversations. And when we talk, I think in equity aspect for people with disabilities, a lot of people hear the terms like accommodations and trying to help someone. And we're always talking in that ability of helping somebody get to the bar and the productivity that you want, where they make and earn that wage. It's not, you're going to pay somebody $15 an hour and then you're going to hire a person with a disability, pay them $15 an hour and expect less. It's what can we put in around supports to make sure that they're as productive, if not more productive. So we have a lot of conversations with businesses about, what part of the jobs are essential and what part can we support somebody in getting done what you need, because we want them to earn that wage that everybody else is getting paid. So, we have a lot of conversations with companies about that, and paying everybody equal for the same amount of work, I think, is the goal.
Yeah, that's great. And that's inclusiveness, right? I mean, when we're wanting to be equitable and inclusive, I love that you said leveraging those skills and getting them where they need to be. It's not just paying out that amount. So absolutely, absolutely. So when we look at the National Fund for Workforce Solutions, they have shared a job design framework that is a framework of racial equity and inclusion. So speaking of inclusion, right? And the following question refers to the pillars of the framework. And I'll go really, I'll mention the pillars for our audience as well, so that they're familiar if they're not familiar with the platform. But the 4 pillars are core, which is compensation, work environment, and supervision quality. And then support, which is training, internal assistance and external supports. And then opportunity, which is career development, mentoring and coaching, and acknowledgements. And then the last one is voice, which is engagement, improvement, and participation. So with that in mind, tell us a little bit about what does that look like in each of your organizations?
Well, for my organization, I honestly start with the voice first. I want to make sure that I am engaging each and every employee, finding out what is the needs, what is their expectations from us as an organization. What can we provide? Tools, resources, keeping the door open. We are in a virtual world right now, but this platform and other platforms we provide as well, having touch-ins with our staff, having weekly meetings with our general managers, just making sure that we are allowing them to be heard. And in that being heard, taking efficient notes and following up and following through and making sure that we're meeting the needs of them as well. Opportunities are always literally growing on both sides of the sphere with both of the organizations. Construction is going up daily. We are taking on some huge projects, and we need to make sure that we are allowing our employees to be promoted within as opposed to bringing in external, because that divides and brings an immediate divide with our employees. From the retail side, we have our general managers, AGMs, we have leads, and so they are active in making sure that they're doing what they need to do to be recognized. And we are putting that responsibility on our GMs to make us aware so that we can hire within and promote, because anyone that knows you work with someone and they come up into a rank above them, you get along better if you've worked with them already. So we make sure we do that. Support on every side, from our C-suite, our executive boards, to our middle management, to our entry. We all support each other on the harvest side and on the AKA team. Team is literally what this is. We can't do anything successfully without everyone being involved. And then the core values, compensation, work environment. We understand that people come to work not because they want to, it's because they have to. And so we have to make sure that we are giving them the resources, the support, the opportunity, and the voice that they deserve.
I heard you mention voice a couple times, and I absolutely love that, because I think that's critical to to engage employees, and also for job satisfaction.
Yes.
We come to work because we have to, but we want to like to come to work as well.
That's right. That's right.
Right? So I think that's I love that you mentioned hearing the voices, and especially because of the shift in the workforce and the shift, going into a virtual world, you're absolutely right. The dynamics have changed. And so how are we engaging those, how are we engaging our support, our teams, our employees in this different work style or workforce, or the way we're engaging in these past couple of years. So thank you for that, Nicole.
Absolutely.
Jared, did you want to chime in?
Go ahead. You can follow up. I'll try to wrap up. Nicole already touched on everything. I don't even know what I could add to that.
She really did. She did a great job. I'm just gonna, highlight a couple of things core as far as, core, the support, opportunity, and voice, and I'll go in that order. And so when I think about Fifth Third in our organization, one of the things that was really critical for us was looking at pay equities throughout. So I think I kind of highlighted that. So just making sure that we're looking at internal equity and making sure we're paying people fairly, especially looking at the market data and what's out there. So that was important. One of the things that was very impressive that I loved about my organization, what we did last year when COVID hit, is that we knew that our frontline workers were important. And so we put some things in place to make sure that they were supported. So that was extra time off. It was also extra bonus pay. We just actually did that bonus pay, an additional bonus pay just 2 weeks ago. And so we wanted to let them know we appreciate the hard work that they put in and risking themselves. And even though we put a lot of things in place to safeguard our employees, but that was important. So financial wellness is important for our employees. And we have a whole lot of other benefits along with that. When I think about opportunity, when I think about our development, we're still one of the financial institutions that have tuition reimbursement. We have a partnership with the University of Phoenix where you can get a discount to continue your education. But the other important part is creating pathways. And I know we're going to talk about this later, but creating career pathways to make sure that you may start at this level, but you can end at this level, and making sure that people are supported. And I'll just highlight a little bit about the voice. The voice of our employees is extremely important. One of the things that our organization has done is participated with a third-party organization that has come in to do employee viewpoint surveys to hear what employees are looking for to stay engaged. And our engagement scores have increased over the years, even more so after last year. And so I've been impressed. So we've been talking about how we can do better when it comes to recruitment and retention and promotion and things like that. So we are listening to our employees and taking the information that they're giving us to make better improvements to keep them engaged.
Absolutely. And that's a great commercial for our employee engagement survey right now. If I have any Metro Health employees out there, we have an employee engagement survey happening right now. And that's absolutely when you have large organizations, to capture those voices that, from front lines to, all the way throughout the organization, it is critical. And I like the compensation piece is an acknowledgement piece that is kind of rewarding the employees for, we know it's been tough. The last couple of years has been really tough. And so every little bit of acknowledgement and platform to hear voices is critical in these trying times. Jared, I know you're just busting at the seams.
No, it's all good. I mean, I have a different, I always think through like kind of my disability focused lens. And when I think of opportunity, is one of the things we fight for more than ever, and they kind of talked about maybe opportunity to grow. I would even start like the opportunity to even get your foot in the door, right? So for people with disabilities have historically been kept out of the labor market. It wasn't even so many years ago, they weren't even in the classroom, right? So they were in a different building and all of these different stuff. So from the equity, when like recruitment or job descriptions, when you're building in experience or requirements, think about like, well, somebody might have been, discriminated against and not be able to have that experience based on who they are and the demographic that they sit in, not because they're not a hard worker or things like that. So we'll come to companies and they'll say, we're looking for a person with a year experience. But why, right? Like, isn't this an entry-level job? And somebody probably would have loved to have a year experience, but no one's been willing to hire them. And so does that really need to be in the application? And I'm sure I always tell people, like, I'm sure you've hired people with tons of experience that really pulled the wool over your eyes, right? So you've hired people that do great in interviews and are terrible employees. maybe the opposite could be true. Maybe someone's bad at an interview or doesn't have the experience and they end up being great. So how are you giving that opportunity to even get your foot in the door, and considering, where someone's coming from that could have negated some of that opportunity? There's those studies like, oh, if you just change the name on a resume from a male to a female, like people get less calls, right? But that right there is saying that they're equal, right? So we know that if you're a female, if you have a disability, the chances that your resume is the same as somebody else is unlikely. So are you equitably considering someone's experience based on the opportunity that they had? And how are you thinking through that? So that's the thing we fight for businesses all the time, of like, you may need to give someone their first shot because no one has. And, is this a place that you can do that in there? And then that voice, I think, is another thing. Businesses all the time will be like, can you train our staff on how to support someone with a disability or this disability? And we can do general trainings, but I think, maybe Nicole and LaToya, like, everyone's going to be unique, right? Like, I can't give you a training on what it's like to hire someone with autism. We may think this person has autism, we need to turn the lights down, and we need this, and they need this structure, which may be true, but we also have people that are the polar opposite, right? We have an individual with autism that loves working at the casino because they love the lights and the input. So really having that unique idea of like, everybody's individualized, and really you need to talk with them and ask them. And we don't need to tell you what their disability is, just ask them what they need to be supported. You can do that to anybody. They have a disability, where they come from. Like, what do you need to be successful here? I don't really need to know what the negative parts are about your disability or where you're coming from. What can I do starting here to move forward? So those are kind of the things we talk about. Give the opportunity, and let's sit down with that person as a unique individual to decide what they need to be successful in your organization, which you can do for everyone that you bring in.
That's great. Jared, I love your passion.
No, I get it. It's all right. I get excited. I get it.
we got to talk afterwards. I your passion and your insight, and yeah, absolutely. And I wanna kick it back to LaToya, because she was talking about pathways, and so we're how does your organization help employees advance in their careers and develop their skills? And that's a big one, because it's one thing to get them in the door, and it's another thing to keep them. It's another thing to get them in the door, and are you, to Jared's point, leveraging their skill sets? Because people move and groove at different places and spaces, and sometimes there's some folks excel quickly, right, or have skills that come forward that that may not have been recognizable or identifiable within the interviewing process, right? And then how do you keep those people encouraged and satisfied, motivated? Because then you want to keep them. You're like, oh, this is, not to say it's a diamond in the rough, but sometimes you do find that diamond in the rough, and it's like, we want to keep this person, and how do we engage them? So I think it's really important, because I think we're good at getting people through the doors. I will be honest, it's something within our organization, and especially the larger the organization, is the pipelines, right? And then how do you keep them, but not just keep them in the same spot for years and years and years. And if you're okay with that, that's one thing. But how do we move them up? How do we harvest that talent that are those diamonds in the rough, that have those skills that that are just shining, and we're like, we got to do something with this individual to help them advance forward. So LaToya, because you started with the pathways, I'd love to hear more about pathways in your organization, and what do they do to help folks move forward.
This is a great time to start having this conversation. As you're thinking about you're in fourth quarter, we're trying to end the fourth quarter as well as we can. And now we're also thinking about how 2022 is going to look like for us. So this is a great time right now to do an assessment. This is fall season, a time for change, right? So this, I would recommend a good time for someone to create this strategic time on their calendar to do a personal SWOT analysis. So if anybody went to business school, we have to do the SWOT analysis, right? Strengths, weaknesses, opportunity, stretch, right? So do a personal one and really think about where they are in their career. Think about what were some of the milestones that they hit, aha moments. Where am I short in meeting my goals this year or last year? I know last year was a little different. but where we want to go, right? So that, and create a development plan. So we encourage to create development plans. And so in that development plan, you're asked a whole lot of questions. Are you ready to move up, lateral? Sometimes take a step back to be able to move forward, right? So this is a time to really do that assessment and really create a gap plan. The difference between where you are and where you want to be, there's a gap. So how are you going to squeeze and close that gap? And this is an opportunity to look at what you do well, what are some of the things you need to work on, and what are some of the key people who can help you to get there. I tell people, especially my students, when I'm talking to them, I talk about my 5 of 5. You need to have 5 of 5, and you need to have a mentor, a coach, an accountability partner, a negotiator, and somebody who's advocating for you when you don't have a seat at the table. So when you think about that, we encourage our employees to do this self-evaluation. So everybody who's looking at Fifth Third, self-evaluations are due on November the 26th. Anyway, but this is the time that we are doing our self-assessment and highlighting, hey, these are some of the things I did very well this year. Here are my accolades. Sometimes we don't give ourselves enough grace. Sometimes we don't give ourselves enough credit. We're so quick to criticize or think about what we don't do well, and we don't focus on what we do well. And if we harness our time on our strengths, our other areas are going to eventually improve, right? And so this will be a time that we'll do that. The other ways that we're supporting our employees is through development, through classes. So we have a whole lot of online classes. We use a platform called Degree. We also use LinkedIn Learning, and we have a partnership with Harvard Manager. So we have other tools and resources for employees to use to help in their development, along with supporting them on either outside external trainings or what have you. Again, we have a partnership with University of Phoenix. We have tuition reimbursement. So we're always encouraging individuals to develop. But the key point I want to say, you are responsible for your development, not your manager. You are the conductor, the driver, the pilot. You have to drive it. It is up to you. Your managers and your organizations provide tools and resources, but it is up to you. It is okay if you want to stay in your current role, but how are you going to be 1% better than you were the previous year? And it is okay if you want to move up, but assess where you want to go and make sure you're ready, and make sure you have the people around who are going to support you. And if there are any gaps, figure out a plan and how to bridge that gap.
I absolutely love it. I always tell people, we tell people within the organization, tap into your why. Why am I here? And because, we all have a why. And so let that why drive you. I also love the quote, everything I do positions me. And you're absolutely right. My motto is, if there ain't no way, you make one.
That's right.
Right? You set your own expectation, because you can't expect, you can't expect somebody to set goals for you if you don't have goals for yourself. And so that's what I tell folks. And when they come in here and they, I have folks that come before me and say, I'm stuck in my career, or where do I go from here? My question to them is, where do you want to go? And why are you stuck? And so we know that sometimes there are, there are not always, openings or whatever where people would like to go, but don't let that hinder you, right? And how do we navigate those waters to create our own pathways and to find a way in our own networks and to build? And you're absolutely right, Latoya, is you have to have a critical conversation with yourself. Know your strengths, but also know your, and I'll say, opportunities, right? Because a great team leverages each other. We're not always going to be strong in everything we do. That's impossible. I love that you said know your, you've got to know your faults as well as your successes, because you got to know yourself before someone else does. And how can you leverage that? Because my weaknesses does not mean that I'm not a weak person. It means that, maybe you're stronger in another area than I can. So how can we leverage each other to be successful and move forward? I tell my team it's a wheel and a spoke, right? You need the spokes in the wheel, but if we're all on the same wheel, we're going in the same direction. So, I see Nicole, she's ready to jump in. No, bring it on, Nicole, bring it.
I'll say this, with both organizations, it's very unique because the AKA team has been in existence for 10 years. Harvest of Ohio has been less than 6 months. So I am really at both spectrums of the coaching, the empowering, the resource that we can bring to them. But it's great because it's 10 and 6. So I'm able to approach it with each employee where they come. So in all things, you get the lesson. So even though, we are only 6 months old, but we've been employed at other, organizations, and we bring our best self and worst self to the table. So I sit with each employee and we are mapping out what that needs to look like for them in, 2022. How can we provide the resources and the information that they need in order to empower themselves? Promotions, training, mentoring, coaching, all of those things, we are providing, but it starts within them. They have to let us know, what are the things that they would like to acquire as it relates to business acumen and learning a SWOT analysis and doing some DISC training and learning of how do you lead and why do you lead? Are you informational? Are you tactical? Those type of questions I'm asking in our meetings with our employees. And we have a lot of first-time managers, first-time GMs, but they've been working, so they know what is expected of them as it relates to an employee. But then when it comes to a leadership role, how can I assist them and make them better? So we are working, and then we also on our construction side, we have veterans that I am gleaning from and sponging off of and learning how do they, move in these different these times as it relates to construction management, virtually, even taking on huge projects. And how do we make sure that those that are interning and our students that we're bringing on, how are they learning, and how are our veterans allowing them to teach them some things? So I'm putting the two together, and it's a very exciting time for me because I have employees that have been here or in the industry over 20 years, and then I have someone just coming off of college, and they're like, well, have you considered the different platforms and learning how to put graphs and designs into the system where they're old school, they're tangible, they have the designs, the physical papers. And so, just merging and gapping those two types of persons together is really thrilling for me. Every day I come to work, it's like, okay, what can I learn and what can I learn from my employees today? So this is great.
Yeah, that sounds exciting. Yeah, that's great. Jared,
Yeah.
you're quiet over there.
No, I'm taking it all in as always. And I think, our field has always struggled. Like we've always been like a deficiency, weakness focused field of disability, right? We come in and we sit in, in school and tell the list of everything someone's not good at. We tell the businesses what someone's not going to be good at. We really don't focus on those strengths. And I think, acknowledging what those are is very important in anyone's growth. But I think focusing on the strengths or what we want to turn in those weaknesses to. The removal of a weakness doesn't always mean it's something better, right? Like if we look at a metaphor of like a bridge, if a pillar isn't doing well, removing it is also not going to help, right? You have to build the version of what you want, the ideal version, and work through that. Sometimes I think we evaluate staff for opportunities and raises and go, what are the negative parts we need to remove? And that's a really challenging thing in changing a system, changing a structure, changing a person. It needs to be more of like, what do we want this to be in the ideal version and build towards that? I think it's hard in this deficit world where we're trying to figure out what we're bad at and remove it, as opposed to what do we want to be and how do we want it to function, and let's build to that. So that's my only comment. I think when we focus on, strengths and weaknesses, some people just like, I got to get rid of these weaknesses, or I got to get rid of that person's weakness. Build on the strengths and build them in the direction that you think would be ideal for the organization, not on just a path of eliminating the weaknesses or what you perceive as weaknesses. So I think that's an important, distinction. Focus on that, more the positive image and not, the removal of barriers all the time.
Yeah,
And I think from our seat too, we have to make sure that we empower those that are transparent about their weaknesses. Because if we don't have that conversation, we can't groom, we can't promote, we can't provide them the resources and the opportunities that they need to change that narrative. To you, your weakness might be something that is a strength for me. So I can do a one-on-one with you or put you in a direction or a network with people like a Latoya, like a Jared, that can say, well, let me get you in touch with someone and see how we can make what you consider your weakness a strength. But it starts with transparency. And I think that in our field, we have to allow that space for them to let us know that.
And I appreciate what Nicole said, because it's all about awareness and self-awareness, right? It's not for you to continue to keep hindering on what you don't do well, because you probably got more things you do well than you don't do well, right? So let's focus on those. But I do want to piggyback on something that Jared said earlier, and he was spot on. We expect new employees to assimilate to our organization when we need to meet people where they are. And we need to do a better assimilating to the new hire, to the new employee, and not vice versa. We've been doing it not so well the other way around. And I think it's key and important that we start meeting people where they are, because then you will start to see a shift in people's performance and their productivity when they feel more inclusive, right? This is a whole reason why we're having this conversation. How can I bring my full self, my whole self to work and all of my abilities?
Yeah, absolutely love it. And you're all absolutely right. So I'm a person of quotes, right? And so this quote is like so fitting, because it says, when a flower doesn't bloom, you fix the environment in which it grows, not the flower. And so I think it is really fitting for the conversation that we're having right now. Y'all hit it on the nail. I think that in the systems that we grow up in, so to speak, and the way we evaluate, right, from school with the grading systems, right, and we look at the defaults versus the positives. It's a I love it, Latoya and Nicole. I think you both hit at it. Meet people where they're at, right? Meet people where they're at, and leverage the difference as a strength as well. Because I think Nicole said it well as well, that weakness may be somebody's strength. I love that. Can I take that down, Nicole? As a
Sure, you sure can. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Absolutely.
I would just jump in. Oh, so the only thing, like, and Nicole and Latoya jumped, kind of pinpoint something I guess was kind of just came into my mind here, is that, like, authentic self, right? Like, so many people are hiding who they are because they just don't have the freedom and safety to be authentic, and that's like stressful and challenging, and that's why people leave jobs. And a lot of the working from home allowed them to be who they were, and now they got to go back to the office and put the mask back on, and they don't feel as comfortable and to be that authentic self. So as managers, HR, supervisors, leaders, giving people the freedom to be exactly who they are and fail, and stand up in a meeting and go, oh, I tried that did not work at all. Like, that is like blasphemy in corporate world. You picked an idea that was wrong. We're just kind of hide it or sweep it under the rug. But if you want to be a company that's innovative and growing, you should be failing a lot. And people are so afraid to fail, and it's going to hurt their promotion chances. And so allowing people to understand, like, yeah, give it a shot. It's more likely than not it won't work. If we're trying something new and we're in uncharted territories, or we're doing something we haven't done before, there's a good chance it'll fail. But everyone doesn't want to bring those ideas up. And it's because I just feel there's no freedom to just try something and not have it be a permanent blemish on your record forever. And especially if you come from a demographic that is already at the back of the list in promotions and stuff like that, it's even more important to not try anything. You just kind of show up and do what you're told and don't rock the boat. And then companies don't really innovate or change because everyone's just trying not to shift out of the lane. And I think it squelches a lot of innovation and opportunity.
Absolutely, absolutely. We know the business case for inclusion and diversity, right? 15 to 30%, are more innovative when people are allowed to bring their voices to the table and their ideas to the table, and we don't squash them. What's that saying that I hear? Fail forward, right? And so, Jared, you're right. If we're not afraid to, take those risks and try something different, and move it forward. And if you fall, I go back to my scripture, fall 7 times, righteous man falls 7 times, 7 times he gets up.
Oh, yes.
He had to come out. But to your point, and then Jared, you also bring up a really critical point too, with serving the underrepresented or the marginalized group. And in the work that I do, we have to realize that sometimes people of, as people of color or any dimensions of diversity, we bring our own history and trauma with that. And so you're talking psychological safety, you're talking about a sense of belongingness, and how do we make people feel safe and welcome in a space to be their whole self? Because if you're not feeling safe, you're not going to bring your whole self. And to your point, Jared, then we are squashing, that flower from blooming, and we're not giving people the opportunity to bring their whole self or bring what they got, because they're tempering it because of fear of the responses that they may get. And so, yeah, this is, and so what are some of the recommendations for employees to be empowered? Okay, we've talked about some of the things that can, but what are some of the ways that we can, and I know we touched upon some of them, but, how do we further, is there a formal way to empower, engage employees so that they have that, that accessibility within our organizations?
Well, I know for me, with both organizations, Harvest and AKA team, when I first came on, one of the things I am continuing to do is sit with every employee, because I believe that the transparency starts in our office. And I tell every employee, I want to be the person that you need me to be on the other side of the table. So if I come into my HR director's office and I have a problem, or I want some type of resources, first, I want to make sure that it's in confidence. I want to have the assurance that it's just me and you, and that I'm going to bring, the director is going to bring that employee what they need to have. If I don't have it, I will find it for you. So I always encourage employees to empower themselves and do their own research, do their own homework. So if you want something from the organization, vet out the organization. My mother told me a very long time ago that organizations need people to be in the organization, to be an organization. So you can't run an organization without people, period. So what is it that I have to do in order to get the best out of the organization that I'm working for? What resources are you going to be able to provide for me? Are you going to be honest in that? Are you going to look at trends? Are you going to be on top of it? You can't give me a narrative from 2000 if it's 2021. All those kind of things are important when you are wanting to move up in an organization. Finding out who are your board members, going in and attending meetings now, because things are virtual now. I empower my employees, or the employees that I work for, to empower themselves. And then we to work together to make sure that I provide those resources for them.
Absolutely.
So I'll just share a couple of things, and that is this. Some things are similar to what I said already, but this is a time for people to step out of their silos and really start engaging other areas within their organization and even outside of their organizations. This is a time to, as everybody say, get comfortable being uncomfortable. and really a time for rebranding, right? So when was the last time you revamped your resume? Do you still have on there that I got a perfect attendance in high school? You know, you see, we see so much in HR, and some stuff is comical because if you don't laugh, you'll cry. But this is a time that people have to rebrand themselves. People are using social media to connect. What does your social media LinkedIn profile look like? And how are you branding yourself as that professional to let people know that you're looking for opportunities, right? Whether inside or outside your organization. What does your growth plan look like? So if there are some gaps, how are you going to fill those gaps, right? With the right people. You know, my mother always told me, I don't have to know everything. I just got to know people who know something. And so I center myself around people who know something. So I'm so glad I know Jared and Nicole because I don't know everything. But I got people around me that I can call to say, hey, I'm going through this or I'm growing through this. Can you help me? This is a great time right now to take stretch assignments, be on special projects, parachute in another area, you know, some job shadowing. You don't know what you don't know or what you may be interested in if you don't step outside of what your current situation is. And the last thing I'll share is, because Jared talked about it, it is okay to fail. One of the things I do with my team when we have our team meetings, we have a segment of an aha moment or failure, and we celebrate failure. Like I'll ask for permission, like, you know what, we kind of screwed up on this. Are you okay with sharing this? And so I talk about the stuff I screw up on, and they talk about it, and we celebrate because that's where growth happens. That's where creativity happens. And that's when a new mindset comes into play, and you can do something differently to even help solve a problem. We're not solving problems. What are we doing, right? So I love it when we can do those things and have a hiccup moment and say, whoo, I won't do that again, but this is what I learned from that, right? And so it's time for us to start celebrating because that's where the creativity comes from. And again, you drive this. So it's up to you to drive this and get the help and support and ask for what it is that you want and be open to receive.
Ooh, I'm so glad that I am so now I'm going to tap into the three of you guys because you guys are just some awesomeness here. I'm just taking this all in. It's some great stuff. So yes, I love that, Latoya, about leveraging the people around you, and you got to make your own board of directors, right? And your board of directors, your own board of directors are going to be those people that are not afraid to tell you you know, what you need to do to move forward or to coach or to mentor or to advise you. And obviously those board of directors, that those people around you are those people that you're going to trust, and they're going to feed and build into you to move you forward. So I love that. That's really good stuff. That's good stuff. Jared, anything? I know you're bubbling.
No, it's just I always they hit all the points that I have. I just get to kind of wrap up and co-sign everything they say. What I heard from them and what I would agree is kind of like relationships and, you know, building, you know, connections with people is really important, both as an employee and then like leadership. You can do engagement surveys. Those are numbers, right? There's people behind that. There's humans behind that you need to connect and engage with. We know the world is tribal, you know, whether it's politics or departments or race, gender, like we look for people that look like us and feel comfortable. I think Latoya said, like, get used to feeling uncomfortable. Put it in your effort to have a monthly meeting with, you know, certain individuals, or make sure leadership are meeting with different people. And you know, it could be difficult the bigger your organization gets, but having those connections and those relationships and getting to know people that you may not always reach out to. And you know, I'm a millennial, so to me, you know, when I first got into work, it was like work is work and home is home, and you don't go out with this and this. And now, like, that didn't work. I was like telling my supervisor, like, I'd like to get a beer with you, right? Like, we need to chat. I want to know about your dogs. I want to know about your life. Like, this helps me connect with more beyond than like, you're my supervisor. And so getting to know people, I think, on a personal level helps avoid those biases, and it allows you to connect with them on a different way. If we're just looking at someone and we're making decisions on that, like, it's better when I can get to know you, because I'm sure there's so many more things that we have alike than different. And so that to me is one of the best ways of just like just start talking with them. Like when people with disabilities, businesses get nervous. I'm like, I promise you, when I bring some people into interview, you will like all of these concerns will go away. They're just people. Like, you just talk to them, just chat with them, and get to know them, and nothing. You won't be concerned. You won't think this is going to be a problem. So those kind of just really connecting with people and getting to know someone, I feel like eliminates a lot of the bias and the issues, because you know more about who they are, and then they feel comfortable and safe. And so it kind of like leads to the other things that we talked about, that safety, that comfortability. Like, we have conversations, you know, about my kids, or you know about my dogs or my family. And if I'm having trouble at work, maybe it's that, right? Like, we start every meeting at my agency with a personal update, as much as you feel, right? Like, we had a team member who's like lost their father to COVID, right? And that was impacted work for a long time. And so if they're a new employee and they're not meeting goals or metrics, like, that helps us give an understanding of where they're coming from, right? So allowing somebody the space to connect personally, I think, can alleviate some issues and really help. So that would be my only jump on. I heard a lot from Nicole and Latoya about like relationships and connecting, and I think that's missed sometimes in corporate world.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. And I'm looking at the time like, wow, it sure time flies when you're having fun. And this has been a really good conversation. And I want to give I see some questions coming in, and so I want to allow for at least 10 minutes, because I'm looking at the time. And so I think there's a couple questions that before we start going to the audience questions that we didn't ask. And so I think maybe we can put this into one question. What are some of the challenges? How did you overcome? And then tell us some good news. What are your mountaintop experiences, right? So from both ends, what are some challenges, but then share a good, some great stories. So who would like to go?
I can start. I've been wrapping it up. I'll kick it off.
You're outnumbered, Julie.
Yeah. I'll jump out there. Give it a go. So, I mean, from the disability aspect, we've had a lot of historical challenges, really underserved population in the workforce, and the intersectionality of it. You lay on disability and race or gender, or disability in the LGBTQ plus, identification, and those start to add up when you talk about getting employment or being unemployed. So really focusing on some of those efforts, really our field directing people to not go to work, going to shelters and day services. So our efforts and intentionality to educate the public about the advantages of hiring people with disabilities and inclusion in that business case for inclusion and diversity. And disability falls into that. Sometimes Joanna always helps me out, because we've had panels on diversity and it'll be race, it'll be gender, and like nobody ever mentions disability. So getting that out as part of your diversity initiatives has been a struggle for us, but that's been the opportunity. And I think the mountaintop, some of the COVID results have actually been people with disabilities are participating in the labor force more than they ever have, even before the peak of the 2008 recession. So these opportunities and more businesses going, I need candidates. I need to access candidates that I haven't historically done, especially here in Cleveland. Team NEO will do their misaligning opportunities. There's not an influx of people coming to Cleveland to work, right? So where are the demographics and the groups that we've left out of the conversation? Let's get them in, and that's going to help them, but that's going to help us as an organization. So I think the mountaintop is businesses realizing DE&I is smart business practice. It's profit, revenue, all of that. It's not a charity thing to do to feel good about it. It's how you survive in today's economy. So I'm excited to move forward. These companies are going, I need positions, so I'll consider ex-offenders, veterans, people with disabilities, other groups that I've never considered or discriminated, because I have to survive.
Great.
So for us, construction and the cannabis industry are like oranges and apples. There's a lot of opportunity, which is a great thing, is a huge mountain experience for us. Legislation has, been a benefactor as it relates to how we're able to move and operate and promote and market, from the cannabis side. However, there's plenty of opportunities, mountaintop experiences that we're having with companies that are supportive, that are allowing us to talk about our products. We have different vendors and different public forums that we're able to talk about legislation and hopefully, educate the consumer about medical marijuana. And we also know that it's going into being public probably next year. So there's some mountaintops and some valley lows as it relates to that. We're pushing through. On the construction side, we're building rapidly, making sure that we have DEI&A available to all of our employees, working with our partners, communities, making sure that we are vetting out the proper, candidates that we need, asking the pertinent questions. What is it that we need to have available so that everyone feels like they're involved? Creating data and outline and doing projections as it relates to what failed on one project, what was successful on the other, and being transparent so that the next time something rolls out, we're better equipped and prepared for it. So just making sure that we are having, to Latoya's point, the uncomfortable conversations at the valley low so that we can get to the mountaintop experience on the back end.
And I would just say for me, I have grown with my organization for 22 years. And so I have all kinds of mountain highs and valley lows, being able to, use what I call the pie theory, perform and have the image and exposure, what have you. But I want to address one thing. I say my 22 years because there were times in my career where I thought I needed to exit. And we're talking about this great resignation right now, right? And so I just want to say this. Before you contemplate having, exiting your organization, you got to have a strategy. You need to ask yourself, is this the time for me to transition, or what's my breaking point? What other positions can I consider within my organization before I leave? Am I leaving because of the leader? Am I leaving because of the culture or compensation? Because people leave people, they don't really leave organizations, right? And then if you're not going to leave, how are you going to cope until you make that transition, and what's your time frame? But you got to take it from this perspective. You got to think about it mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and physically. And when you look at those things, you got to have a good strategy. You got to visualize, okay, what's going well and what do I want to move into the next if I'm going to make this transition? Emotionally, I got to forgive myself and others so I can attract the same thing once I transition. Spiritually, sit with yourself in stillness and let it come to you. And physically, if you know it's time to leave, don't say nothing, just start leaving, picking up stuff off your desk and start emptying things out slowly. And because this is the time that you really need to be fully prepared if you're going to exit. But please don't exit just for more money. You got to think about everything. What are your must-haves, right? And think about what's important to you and prioritize it and have a strategy and leave on a good note, because remember what Jared said, it's about relationships. And people follow. HR people talk. That's what we do.
And one thing I'll also say too, when we're building these relationships, there are some people that are physically coming to work, but they're mentally not there. And we have to recognize that and hopefully be able to have those pertinent conversations to see what we can do on our end to change that narrative, so that they can feel productive and they can feel valued and they can feel it's okay not to be okay. I tell that to everyone all the time. So let's start with what's the not okay so that we can make it okay. And it may not be more money. It may just be recognition. Recognition is free. It takes nothing to be nice and to empower people vocally on a meeting, and making them aware that we're aware of what they're doing. It really takes nothing, but it takes more not to do. And so I think, we have to make sure that we keep that in the forefront daily when we're working with people, because I also say to our employees, we understand that when you leave here, your next job begins, which is your family, which is your life, which is yourself. So we want to make sure that we recognize that, and we're empathetic and give each other grace, to Latoya's point.
Absolutely. So there's a couple questions that came through, and I want to make sure that we are giving them enough time. There's one
Hi,
direct.
Mark.
Oh,
This is Joanna. Due to the lateness, I want to ask Arian Kirkpatrick's question, and I'll ask it, and then if everybody can respond.
okay.
How do you handle diverse recruitments when they exceed your expectations, and a majority of your recruitment efforts has majority diverse candidates, and you are accused of being racist? An example is that previously there were 0 applicants considered for next step initiatives. And it looks like for 0 applicants considered. And then it seems like they did some outreach, and now 80% of minority applicants are being considered, and it's being questioned. And they note that in their field that this is happening a lot. Is there some advice or that you can share? And note that we'll make this like the last.
So I think I'm sorry, Joanna, because part of the question was a little blurred for me, but I'm going to do my best to answer as best as I can. I want to say, hopefully, that most organizations are doing whatever they can to be fair and equitable when they're looking for talent. If you're using an applicant tracking system, honestly, if I'm looking at the names or what have you, I don't know if somebody's black, white, man, female, what have you. So hopefully as recruiters, we're looking at our data management techniques. I know for me, when I think about when I'm hiring, I consider honestly the organizations that I have partnerships with. And I'm also looking at how can I continue to diversify my organization. So I have partnerships like with, the Urban League and El Barrio Workforce Development. I sit on the county workforce development board. So I take in consideration those diverse organizations, workforce organizations that have a lot of talent that they have trained and got people ready to go. I look at those individuals. Then I look at people within, we ask our employees to send us employee referrals. And so we're doing our best because guess what? It's better to get a employee referral, you know a little bit about that person versus someone that you see in the system. Now, don't get me wrong, as an African American female, and I know sometimes what we do, sometimes I'll speak for myself. I know that I purposely chose names for my children so they would not be discriminated against. And so I know it's happening out there. I know that there are people who are doing certain things, but I think as organizations think about inclusivity, we need to think about what organizations we're partnering with so we can bring on diverse talent and be very intentional about partnerships and relationships. How are we looking at our internal equity? Are there people within our organizations we can be promoting, right? And replacing with a good backfill pipeline of diverse talent? How are we connecting with our youth colleges and universities, our HBCUs, to bring in a pipeline of diverse talent? What about our affinity groups within our organizations, if we have those, that we can partner with them to bring in more referrals? So, I hope I'm answering that question, and I know Arian, so she can call me offline and we can have this dialogue, because we do need to do a better job in making sure that we are getting diverse talent in our organizations and doing it right and doing it fair, and making sure that we're not excluding anyone as well.
So I'll say, Arian is my boss, and that is really the conversation that we are having when our leadership team is meeting, to ensure that we are considering everyone across the board. We are proud that we are people of color that are in C-suite positions, so we do not want to negate that, because that is uncommon in this industry, in both industries. So one of the things that we are making sure is that we are connecting with people and organizations to ensure that we're doing the right thing, that we don't want to come across being one-sided in one way. Having those meetings and conversations with people and asking for referrals and asking to sit on panels as I'm interviewing different candidates, so that I'm not doing that. Being transparent and making sure that I am intentional in the selections that I have. Working with our general managers, having interviews and vetting and conversations and phone screenings. And documentation is key. Documenting everything that you do, everything that you intend to do, everything that you wish you hadn't done. Document, because then when it's asked and it's questioned, you have proof and probability that you've done the right steps to make sure that you're not getting in the gray area, that you're staying in direct line. So having a conversation, getting yourself around people that will hold you accountable and make sure that you're doing the right thing, and just staying on course. Staying on course.
Yeah, I don't relate. My last, oh, go ahead. My last thing is, like, intentional partnerships is the way to boost pipeline. So if there's, a claim of reverse discrimination or anything like that, it doesn't have to be always taking away from someone. So we made partnerships with this disability organization, this organization. Are you aware of any other partnerships that we can make to include other people? Do you have a connection at Case or John Carroll or Baldwin? Like, let me know what organizations you would like me to reach out to increase the pipeline. We're just trying to be intentional. And when we do that, we're going to see an influx in candidates from our intentionality. We want to be intentional, but we don't also want to leave anyone out. So if you have any, I would just push back to that person, like, do you have any organizations that you think we could or are not partnering with to bring us back to those levels? So there's nothing wrong with intentionality. And that's hey, we're happy to reach out to any partner that you know of. Please let us know so we can include everyone. I think is a good rebuttal to that if someone's making a claim.
Yeah, it's not to hire to a fit. It's just to make sure that we're hiring folks who can add value. We don't hire to fit. How are you adding value?
I love it. You all have been rock stars. I got notes. I had to grab an envelope and was like, oh, that's good. Let me write that down. And that's good too. I'm going to feel that. So, one, thank you, Margie, for being a fantastic moderator. Jared, Latoya, and Nicole, thank you, thank you, thank you. You all have given a wealth of information about equitable job design from both the employer perspective as well as from the employee perspective. And so I thank you so much for sharing your expertise. I also want to thank all of the thank the audience who joined us, and we appreciate you participating in today's webinar. We hope you found this webinar engaging and informative. If you have thoughts to share, please let us know. This concludes today's session. Thank you again, and have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, everyone. Thank you.